What's up, everybody? It's Mr. Jackson here with another episode of Lessons from Papa's House. And today I want to talk about something. I was talking with some friends of mine in a Discord that I belong to, and we were talking about my grandmothers. My grandma that raised me, Papa, it's Lessons from Papa's House. That's Papa's wife, Granny. And then I actually had the pleasure of knowing my great grandmothers when I was younger. One of them passed away when I was 12, and that was my grandmother's mother. And one of them passed away. Well, she had dementia, so she got to where she couldn't talk and have conversations and things like that. Let's see. She passed away in the 2010s, but it was years before that, when we moved her into a nursing home and all those kinds of things. But anyways, the question that I want to get to today is, I've seen the conversation online around the 50s, right? And there are those that would argue that the women back then weren't happy and that they were, almost subjugated to that lifestyle. But that was not my experience. The women that I knew and loved and grew up with and that helped raise me, they all were, they just didn't seem like, when they talked to me and taught me things, and they just didn't seem like they felt subjugated or oppressed. I'm thinking about calling this video that, were the women of previous generations oppressed? And now I will say, disclaimer, I don't mean to discount anybody's experience. If you have a grandma or an aunt or a great grandma or anybody that you knew that had a bad marriage or had a rough life, or maybe didn't even, jive with the values of what was going on back in their time period, that's fine. That's fine. If that's how you want to feel, like that's fine. That's totally fine. But I have heard a lot of things over the years when people talk about women from that era that has always struck me as disrespectful. To me, if you called my grandmother oppressed, not only do I feel it's disrespectful to who she was and how she carried herself and how she lived her life, but also just wasn't true. She didn't feel oppressed. My grandmother, first of all three of my grandmothers were incredibly powerful women. Everybody in the family respected them. Everybody in the family loved them. Everybody in the family would do anything for them, right? And I'll give you an example. My great grandma, my grandmother's mother, right? This woman had Jedi level superpowers. Like, I'm talking, she could get you to do stuff and you didn't even know that she got you to do it. You thought it was your idea. That's how genius this woman was. She, one time, told my papa that she was thinking about buying a new rake. And she was in her late 70s when she's thinking about this. Like, she could still drive, but she was a fairly tiny woman. She was probably 5'1", 5'2", and, 110 pounds. She was a little lady, but powerful, right? And I also want to know real quick, despite these women being powerful, they also were still demure. They were feminine. They were sweet. They did not have to be a boss babe or any of that stuff. They just didn't. They didn't have to do. They were a boss. And my grandma Lee ran businesses. She ran the post office in their tiny little town. She helped, my great grandfather with all of his finances because he ran a logging business for years and worked for sawmills and things like that. And so these are very powerful, bright, talented women that could do anything that they wanted, and they did. And they loved their life, right? And this woman owned acreage in Arkansas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, back to the story. My great grandma was just talking about buying this rake. And she knew that my grandfather, being the good guy that he was, the good man, the good provider and leader that he was, she knew that he would think to himself, like, well, yeah, I'll get her a rake, but then that's not enough. No, I need to rake the yard for her because she is, she's a frail older woman and she doesn't need to be doing that. She doesn't need to be out there, yeah, she's retired and, but like we're here to take care of her. That's why my grandparents moved to Arkansas, was because that's where my great grandma lived. And as she got older, she needed some people to be there for her. So he goes and buys a rake and rakes all the leaves. And I wasn't there to witness this, but I just have a feeling, knowing her as well as I did, that she was sitting back in her rocking chair on our porch having a good old time, knowing that she got exactly what she wanted. And she didn't have to argue with anybody. She didn't have to yell at anybody. She didn't have to be demanding or, be the boss. She just knew how to, she just went all Inception on the minds of the people around her. And even me, so when I moved there as a 12-year-old to live with my grandparents, my grandma lived in a trailer next to us, and we lived in the main house. But of course, we always made her dinner, and she didn't always feel up to walking down to the house. So my grandmother would give me my great grandma's dinner, and I would, take it up there to her. And if she needed something, I'd always ask her, "Do you need anything, Granny Lee?" And I'll go get it for you. Whatever she needed. And she just always, I remember when she passed away, and my grandma asked me, "Chris, what was your favorite thing about your Granny Lee?" And I said, she just always had the sweetest voice. And that's what I mean, is like, we have this idea in modern society that the only way to have power and the only way to get things that you want is to be ruthless, and you have to just take it. And, which, if you're in a war or something like that, certainly some truth to that. But the women of the older generation, I think, had this sacred knowledge almost, that they knew that wasn't the way to do it. That yes, the man was the head of the household, but they were the neck that could turn the head any way that they wanted. And they did so. I'll give you another story. My grandma, my granny, she had a friend over. And they're just sitting there in the living room chit-chatting, and I was kind of, doing the teenager thing, going back and forth, doing stuff in and out of the house. Papa, I think, was in the kitchen doing something, and there was a ceiling fan right above them, right? And the light goes out. And immediately, my grandfather goes to the closet to get another bulb for the light. And then it had one of those, globe covers on it. And because I was taller than my papa and it was easier for me, I start, put my hand up there and I'm doing the screws and, all that jazz, right? And we had that thing changed in like 90 seconds. And and my grandma's friend looked at her and she goes, well, dang, Miss Jackson, you got yourself a NASCAR pit crew. I mean, they changed that thing lickety split. And see, my grandma didn't have to ask the men in the house to do stuff like that. We just knew to do it. And also, we didn't do it because she's going to freak out if we don't do it. Like, no, we loved this sweet, adorable woman so much that we would do anything to take care of her. And we were on it the minute it happened. I remember before we got a generator, a storm knocked out our power one time, which, would happen a lot out there in the country, because, there's only one power line coming into the house. And if a tree fell on any of the lines between us and the next town, everyone's power was going to be out. And that's just the way it was. My papa had this little inverter. He goes out to the car immediately, hooks up the inverter to the car battery, and it had enough juice that it could run her TV and some lights and some, just basic stuff that we needed until the power came back on, and then my grandma was happy. But that same woman also expressed a lot of gratitude. I remember she would ask my papa for the simplest things. She would ask him, my grandma really loved Coca-Cola, right? That was like her one vice, just loved Coca-Cola. And papa knew exactly how to make it. She liked light ice. It had to be ice in it, but not a lot of ice, right? That's how my grandma liked it. And she would just look up at my papa like he hung the moon, like he was the only man in the universe. And she would look at him and she would go, babe, will you please just make me a little bit of Coke? And he would go get it for her. And then when he'd bring it to her in her chair, she'd usually be sitting there in her recliner doing crossword puzzles. Again, brilliant woman, immaculate vernacular, very well spoken. So she's sitting there just doing her thing, and she'd ask him for a little bit of Coke and he'd bring it to her. And then she'd look at him again, like he hung the moon. And she would say, you take such good care of me, baby. You take such good care of me, sweetheart. And that's how they were. And that's why I created this channel, because I want to share stuff like that with you guys, because I think the narrative has gotten out of hand that marriage is just all sacrifice and duty. And it is those things for sure. But my grandparents could take the smallest little interaction, the smallest little moment, and turn it into just this beautiful thing that would just fill each other's cups up all the time. And I want that for other people. I want that for myself, but I want it for other people. And I think that's why I created this channel, is because I want to bring that perspective to people, that you can choose to have that. You can choose to do that. You can choose those things. And I also am making this video to show you that, women that want to be homemakers and stay-at-home moms and things like that, that does not, first of all, it doesn't mean you have to meet an aesthetic of like you have to go around wearing sundresses and making sourdough bread. Like, that's not what traditionalism is. That's like sort of a cosplay of traditionalism. And, no hate to any of the gals out there that make those kind of channels. Some of them I think have lovely channels and lovely content, lovely things to say. So, it's all up to them. Excuse me. I'm just bringing you my perspective, okay? And so anyways, to come back to the original point of this video, it just was not my experience that these women were oppressed. I'll give you another story. My great grandma was my grandma as well. My grandma had two brothers. She was the only girl, and then my great grandma, my grandmother's mother, she had a lot of men. There were a lot of uncles, and there were more boys than girls, and all of those guys knew not only to be good to her and to be sweet to her, but to also never cross her, because she was a woman that, again, she didn't have to raise her voice or, anything like that. She just had a presence where you just didn't want to disrespect her. You just wanted to treat her like gold. And again, she didn't do it with authority. She didn't go around waving any kind of, master's degree in anybody's face or anything like that. She just effortlessly glided through life, right? And I just admired that. And I grew up with so much respect for women like that. And I want to talk a little bit about my grandfather's mother. Now, she was more of a character. She was very eccentric. When I was growing up, she was a piano player and a singer. And at that point, my great grandfather had passed away back in the late 60s. So, he'd been gone for 20 years at that point, 30 years, by the time I was a little kid. And she would sit there and play him songs on her piano and just have a good old time. And be, she'd yell like he was in the next room, and, hey, Jack, do you like that one? You want to play that one again? She was a character. She used to call her kids by the wrong names because she thought it was hilarious, Like, she just was a character. But same thing, right? Like, everybody just wanted to take care of her because at the end of the day, she was a good mom. And the last thing I want to say is that part of why I grew up loving traditionalism and wanting to be a good provider and a good leader and things like that is not only because of my grandfather and the excellent example that he set for me, but also because of my grandmother. I saw how safe and protected that she always felt, how secure that she always felt, but also, and again, I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I just think it's a good perspective to think about. My grandmother was grateful. If you asked my grandmother about the 20 or so years where she did not have a job while my grandpa went to IBM every day, she never talked about it like it was oppression or like it was a burden. She never talked about it like, oh, your grandpa gets to go out of here all day and I'm stuck here with the kids. That's not how she talked about it. She saw it as a supreme privilege. And she would say this to me many times when I was growing up, that I was so lucky, Chris. I was so lucky. Your grandfather took care of me and he went out and worked and took care of us, and I got to live my dream. I got to stay at home and take care and raise my kids in a beautiful home. And now, mind you as well, my grandma didn't want for anything. My grandma wanted a big screen TV to watch her Lakers games. She got it. My grandma wanted a new car. She got it. My grandma wanted she used to like those, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the little Hush Puppy store, right? She loved that store because she had issues with like blood flow and things, and she's a very very small petite lady, and so her shoe selection was very particular. So she liked those Hush Puppies. My grandpa would make sure that she had them, right? And to the point where like this guy would wear the same pair of pants for 20 years straight till they had holes in them, so that she could have everything that she wanted, right? And so it just didn't. That's not the message that I got. The message that I see some women. I don't want to paint all women with a broad brush. I don't want to do that. But I've definitely seen content out there where, and I've heard some of my dad's ex-wives or other women that I've met throughout my life or just chatted with about this, where they saw that taking care of the kids full time is a burden. And my grandmother not only did that, she would wake up my grandpa had to wear suits, because back then in IBM you had to wear a suit. You had to wear a white shirt and a black tie and a suit. Well, I think you could vary the tie. That's where you get to put your personality in. But she would wake up and even if she complained, she would make a joke out of it. Like, she knew it was so silly that she was complaining. So she used to joke about, oh yeah, I hated the years that he worked on the printers, because Chris, do you know how hard it is to get ink out of a white shirt? But he can't not wear the white shirt because IBM makes him wear the white shirt, right? Like, these are the things, right? But she would just make a joke out of it because she loved taking care of my grandfather. And my grandfather loved taking care of her. And I am so lucky and so privileged and so happy that I got to grow up seeing that, because, and they would tell you themselves that they weren't perfect, but everybody thought they were. Everybody thought they were, because they knew how to treat each other. They had relationship skills. They understood feminine and masculine dynamics. And I want to throw this one more thing in there too. As traditional as they were, they had aspects of them that maybe you would assume were backwards. For example, my grandmother was the sports fan. When I grew up loving basketball and football the way that I did, I was not watching those games with my papa. My papa could care less about sports. Whereas my grandma was, and I mean a sports fan. My grandma would watch golf, huge Tiger Woods fan, huge. Love that man. I've joked for years that thank God all his scandals and skeletons came out after she passed away. She got to die with this pristine image of Tiger Woods because that guy was her favorite. She loved NASCAR, like, and oh man, if the Olympics were on, that one was watching every single event. She curling, bobsledding, like gymnastics, volleyball, like whatever it was. That woman was tuning in. She loved it. She absolutely loved it. So, and my papa, he didn't care about that. He was a true engineer. He just cared about, you know, God and reading his Bible and becoming a better and better Christian and man every day, and, you know, fixing things, how things worked, you know. And you know, they both had, you know, like interests when it came to news and politics and things like that. But you know, they had some things where they, you know, weren't the typical, oh, the man likes football and the woman likes, you know, sewing, which my grandma did like sewing, and she was great at it. She used to crochet things all the time. I have a towel in my fridge that she made years ago, right? So they had those things, but they also had their own personalities and things like that. And so, also, by the way, my grandma was a brilliant accountant and did all the bills. Um, I'll tell you one last funny story. I was looking at my class ring, right? And I brought home the little catalog, and we're looking at the options, and I think it was going to be like a little over $300, right? And they're paying for it because I didn't have the money. And you know, I said this out loud. I was like, well, they had at the time they had this like silver platinum alloy kind of thing that was cheaper than the white or yellow gold. And so I said, well, I don't really care about it being gold, so like, you know, let's get that one. And me and grandma were talking about the prices, and Papa was in the background, and he goes, $300? I didn't pay $300 for your father's ring. You know, mind you, my dad went to high school 20 years before I did, so you know, obviously prices have changed since then. But my grandma said the funniest thing to him, you know, which is, she said, David, you have no idea what I paid for the ring, because you didn't write the check. And he sat there and he goes, yeah, you're right. I don't. I have no idea. I have no idea. Because he didn't. And that's another thing he used to praise my grandma for all the time, that he got to go to work every day and do what he loved, and he didn't have to worry about which bill got paid at what time, or, you know, were the kids going to get to this practice, or, you know, this choir event, or, you know, things like that. He got to be dedicated to his job, and he had to be, because back then, that he was what they called a customer engineer, and customer engineers went to the customer's location like it was an on-site service. You know, he used to have to document mileage because he had to drive his personal car to whatever was going on, and sometimes that would be 3 a.m. He had a pager. I mean, it was like this. I've seen it before. It was like this long. I mean, the thing looked like one of those old school cell phones they used to have, you know, the big, with the huge antennas and whatnot. He had a pager that did that and kept it in his briefcase. And sometimes, you know, something would go wrong somewhere and he'd have to go at 3 a.m. And my granny would get up with him and make sure that he had everything that he needed and that he was taken care of. And then my grandfather in return took care of her. And so if I leave you with this, take care of each other. That's really what relationship. It starts with attraction and, you know, like values, like interests, but take care of each other. And also, like I said, for all you feminists out there, or, you know, ladies that have these negative stories of the past, I'm here to tell you that I'm living proof, as someone who was raised by a 50s couple, but also knew his great grandmothers very well, who were born in like 1901 and 1911, by the way. It's not like they didn't witness the Depression or any of these other things. These women went through hard times, and they still didn't consider themselves oppressed. They considered themselves extremely privileged, and they had good men in their lives that loved them and took care of them. And And that's part of why we did it. You know, I can tell you, as much as I love Papa and I respect him, there was, when I was going through school or winning awards or doing sports, there was nobody in this world that I wanted to make more proud than my grandmother. That is whose approval that I sought when I was young. And I'm so glad that I did. When I graduated college, that woman, you know, I wish I could show you guys pictures, but I'm actually not. I just moved in, so I'm not exactly sure where they're at. But that woman was so proud, was so proud. And probably the hardest thing for me to get over when she passed away was the fact that I wasn't going to get any more chances to make her proud. So anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you guys want to leave any comments, ask any questions, we can make another video talking about my grandmas and how amazing they were. But anyways, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.